A lot of information came out suggesting that SaberSpark was perhaps innocent. We did find out that the victim was not a made-up entity, as people were initially theorizing, but rather it was an individual that more than likely was making a heavily editorialized version of the events that occurred to take a shot at SaberSpark. And here we are. Okay, so right here, for example, how does eating a banana make you a dork? Haha, no, the 69 thing. Bananas are anything but dorky. 69ing. And bananas. A dangerous but sexy combo. Haha, very true. It's also fun. I like how you call it fun. Most people would be like, whoa. Anyways, essentially, why I didn't take these allegations at face value in the very beginning, and why you shouldn't take allegations like these at face value in the very beginning, especially when Emu Emmy was making claims such as, oh, I felt pressured. Oh, there was a power dynamic. Oh, he was being coercive. You really have to take into consideration the idea of implied consent on the basis of, well, what was their dynamic like behind closed doors? What was their dynamic like when they were conversing between each other through Skype or through text messages? And here we can understand that their dynamic was actually very flirty. This didn't just happen out of nowhere, right? These sexual encounters didn't just happen out of nowhere. They occurred because they did have a somewhat flirty or sexual dynamic, as we can see here.
And for a couple of reasons, Saber wasn't prepared to go on the record and talk about it at that time. The most pressing is that Saber was sure that there would be evidence that would support his innocence in the face of these allegations. So use that time to turn his house upside down, looking for old hard drives, old phones, anything that may still hold those records. While there have been undoubtedly dead ends, Saber's actually consistently documented the work he's done to prove his innocence. And timing being everything, Saber would actually only get a hold of these text messages the day Enter's video goes live. The problem with accusations like these, that are once again over a decade old, is that any response you give outside of some actual bloody evidence will be used against you to paint you as guilty. And Saber seems to have correctly assessed this fact, because his options were insanely limited. Even saying nothing beyond a flat denial has been used against him, and that's understandable. People don't really care what Saber's side is, people care that they hate Saber.
But yeah, at the time, when SaberSpark came out with his response, even one of the complaints that I had was that SaberSpark didn't really talk too much about the allegations. And I understand why, because in situations like these, proving a negative is one of the most difficult things that you can do, and not to mention, if something doesn't align directly without evidence, can be directly used against you as a way to say, no, you're dishonest here, you're lying, you're not being transparent with us, so I have more basis to believe that perhaps you are guilty of what it is that you're being accused of.
And want an excuse to—
Because a he said, she said situation, it's one of the most dangerous ways and one of the easiest ways to immediately be labeled as a predator or as a rapist when it comes to allegation cases like these.
Take a shot at him. I get this, there's content creators I don't like and it's fun to see them fall face first into the dirt. But realistically speaking, without any evidence, his testimony would still be treated as a he said, she said. In situations like that, the question comes down to the credibility of the accuser, which is why Emily was asked over the course of a 3-hour interview to address her former controversies. However, if you even have to have a call that is multiple hours long with an accuser to try and—
I need to address this directly. At the time, a lot of people were saying, oh my god, maybe there is something that occurred here. Maybe she was wronged. Maybe there was a rape. Maybe there was a sexual assault. And the reason why is because, oh, if you sit down, people would parrot this. They would be like, if you sit down and actually listen to the call, you'd get all the context to maybe suggest that perhaps she was being fully transparent and perhaps she wasn't lying about the allegations. But in reality, no. In situations like these, you don't really need to go back hours to essentially try to solidify an imperfect victim. What you really need to pay attention to and discern is the structure and the integrity of the initial allegations being levied and how much they hold up when being put under scrutiny on a line of questioning revolving said allegations, right? If you're consistently trying to parse through a person's life history and life story for any ounce of credibility, you're doing something wrong. You are trying too hard to prove something that potentially might be a lie, that potentially might be dishonest. And at that point, you really just need to cut your losses and be like, okay, well, your claims aren't really credible. Why should we take you seriously? Unless you have direct evidence to prove otherwise.
Establish their credibility, I'd argue that's not a particularly good sign. And one thing I want to make crystal clear to all of you is that Emily has lied multiple times, both privately and publicly, in an attempt to obfuscate what her relationship with SaberSpark looked like. That's not just my opinion, by the way, because once I'd had time to review these DMs, I reached out to Mr. Enter, thinking it only fair that he be given a fuller picture. and as you may imagine, he was fucking pissed. Enter, thanks for chatting with me. This is just a very simple one.
Yeah, like, imagine wasting, because this this call was long. Imagine sitting through a 7-hour phone call with somebody, expecting that they perhaps might have a semblance of truth to the allegations that they're bringing forward, expecting that perhaps they were wronged, expecting that perhaps you can find justice for a potential victim, only to realize that most of their story was bogus, because once the person that was being accused finally comes out with evidence, it's like, oh, their initial allegation was heavily embellished and editorialized in a way where it was obviously meant as a way to, like, get back at the person being accused, rather than a legitimate concern for them being wronged. Imagine trying to find everything within your power to showcase why this person, despite their history, might have actually been wronged. Imagine trying to, like, go through all of that just to, like, find any sense of validity, only for your entire time to be wasted, because, as it turns out, they weren't being completely honest the entire time either way.
And discuss these DMs, but considering the fact that when going through this kind of conversation with Emily, she just outright lied to you about the fact that she pulled away, Saber didn't contact her, and this sort of, like, their communication ended by sort of late November. Knowing what you know now, I guess what are your thoughts and opinions, considering they had another 6 months of correspondence?
I am very angry at Emily, that's for start. Like, it really is indescribable what I feel. Like, anger, annoyance, disgust, because, like...
Also, one of the main criticisms that I gave Mr. Enter when I was watching his video is that he was treating this in a way that, even per my standards, while I respect, it is way too serious. He's trying to subject himself to these, like, investigative standards that realistically shouldn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with absolute clowns on the internet that aren't going to give you the full story. They're going to treat you like a dumbass because you're not a legitimate investigator. You're not legitimately capable of doing these type of things. And they're going to try to, like, pull a fast one over you. And that's what occurred. What you want to do in situations like these is get to the focus of the allegations that are being levied, and get to the focus of the story that you want to uncover, and try to scrutinize as much as possible within that conversation to see how much of it holds up when put under pressure, when it's contested by the opposing party. What they did was unnecessary.
We were some of the people who were...
And some people got mad at me. Some people got mad at me because I said that what they were doing was unnecessary. But now, I have been proven right. I have been proven correct. What they did was unnecessary.
Talking to her, like, some of the only people who were talking with her, and she still lied to us.
I mean, I think, yeah, I've seen these DMs between you all, and it seems like you were pretty thorough with asking questions. I don't know, it seems crazy that she was so determined to try and spin a narrative to you guys, and still couldn't just be honest. Because what I find kind of crazy as well is, she could have just said, yeah, I continued talking to Saber for 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? She could have done any number of things, but, like, the contradictions are, like, right there now that we have Saber's information. Maybe she assumed that he'd never be able to find it, which is a stupid assumption, but, like, I don't get the logic. Like, I'm baffled on every level.
Yeah, I do think that she was sort of hedging her bets, and I think because Saber's, you know, it's been a long time. I think Saber says this, actually, when talking to me. It's, you know, it's like 12 years ago, but, you know, it's a hell of a gamble that Saber would have no data at all. And I think that was the bet.
And seems like the bet didn't work.
Considering the shit Brony Fandom has tried to pull.
Yeah, these allegations would have come from a place of essentially banking on the fact that SaberSpark wouldn't be able to prove himself innocent.
And at that time, like, bronies were so excited to be like, you're a brony? I'm a brony. We should all talk on Skype. And that's how we connected. We talked on Skype. And a lot of it was us just initially nerding out over brony stuff. She liked my podcast, like my videos, talk about just the show itself. Episodes are coming out. We would nerd out over that.
See, it's difficult to say, based on what SaberSpark is laying out here, whether or not this is actually a parasocial relationship. I mean that sarcastically, or figuratively, because it's not difficult to say. This is not parasocial at all. They're having a one-to-one connection with each other. They're discussing their interests. So this is already out the window in regards to, like, the first thing that she claimed on how she met SaberSpark. I guess 25,000 subscribers at the time was a pretty popular creator. Sure. But it wouldn't have been somebody, like, you know, famous or celebrity-wise. Unless you're really, really wrapped up into the idea of, like, being horse famous.
I think season 2 was already going on during that time, and season 2 was really good. So I was just nerding out, talking about things we enjoyed with the fandom, and how she wanted to do her own podcast with her friend Sandra, which they would eventually launch in August of 2012, called Pegasisters Live, which we all would laugh, being like, oh, we're the boy version with Bernie Breakdown, and you're the girl version with Pegasisters Live.
Eventually, you know, you've been... How long would you say you were talking, roughly, before you actually met up with Emily?
I'd say 2 to 3 months, because I remember us chatting, I'd say the start of summertime, and then Cantaloupe Gardens would be in late September. So it was a good 2 to 3 months.
What was the lead up to Cantaloupe Gardens then? What was that like between you two?
Again, just us being friendly, talking about the show. Eventually the text would turn flirty. She told me that she was a mom, but she did not have, that she was no longer with the guy that, you know, her daughter's father. And that would eventually become a discussion of her being single. And I was like, oh, I'm single too. And the conversation would then become more flirty, more fun, with that kind of, you know, back and forth. And eventually we both floated the idea of being friends with benefits and looking at Cantaloupe Gardens as a place where we could potentially hook up.
So again, going back to the initial allegations that we read just a few minutes ago, or about 30 minutes ago, it's obvious that the dynamic of them engaging in a sexual interaction, especially when you consider the topic of implied consent, that dynamic has been building up for quite some time, and they were talking about potentially hooking up. So, when this person says, I was raped through coercion, or there's a possibility that there was like coercive rape here, or sexual assault, just doesn't seem to be the case because the dynamic was building up for quite a long time, which is something that a lot of people were debating throughout the course of these allegations being discussed. Was SaberSpark a potentially player individual that treated this girl harshly and didn't really communicate sex with each other? Or was there something building up in the background that wasn't really presented to us up until now?
And at the time, I mean, I was absolutely inexperienced, had no idea. But again, it was nothing where I was like, I wouldn't say I was in over my head, because we definitely went with just, you know, going with the energy of the conversation. Her just really saying, yeah, let's you know, go to the convention, and definitely was keen on the idea of us being friends with benefits.
Okay. Because she says that she was, you know, she positioned you as a sort of curator with this weird power dynamic with her, and she was a massive fan and stuff. Do you think that you held some sort of power or influence over her?
I would say no, and I can only say for myself that I never saw it as such. I always just saw us as friends, and that the rapport was genuine and equal. I mean, of course, I was an older guy, but even then, I was.
Also, given the culture of like early 2012, late 2012, 2013, when these events would have taken place, and given sort of like the internet dynamics, this wasn't really a time where YouTubers had a bunch of cultural impact, at least not yet. This wasn't around the time when somebody had a power dynamic because of their YouTube status. Because largely, if you were a large content creator on YouTube, it was essentially no different than being like semi-popular on Instagram, for example, or semi-popular on Twitter. What can you really do with a YouTube status as your background when at the time getting monetized on YouTube was incredibly difficult? Because typically now, the reason why YouTubers have this sort of power dynamic is because they have a lot of status. They have a lot of status because being a YouTuber is an incredibly lucrative sort of business where you can earn a lot of money. That wasn't really the case back then. In order to earn money in the first place from YouTube, you would need to like sign up onto a network or become partner with somebody or get sponsorships. So the dynamics were completely different. To suggest that this guy had like any sort of power dynamic in general, given how much like, you know, how different culturally YouTube was back then and how YouTubers were seen socially. Like they were no different than your average person. It was just some guy with like a huge, you know, that got a lot of views by making like silly videos on YouTube. How would you even begin to prove that there was a power dynamic off of this guy being like a 25,000 subscriber channel back in the day?
23, I think I just turned 23. I was 23. I remember graduating in spring of 2012, and I was a super senior, so I was 23. No, I never picked up any kind of like I'd say power discrepancy or anything. It was just, us talking and us having a good rapport and us being friends.
What this early relationship between SaberSpark and Emily actually looked like is something that all of us largely have to take on testimony. However, two key things weigh heavily in SaberSpark's favor in this regard. Firstly, in my original video, I said, there are of course no perfect victims and none of us should have those expectations, but in a case like this, where there is no evidence for the accusations being made, the credibility of the accuser is basically all I or anyone else has to go on. And even leaving aside Emily's multiple other sex scandals, the more we look into this, the more we find that Emily is being dishonest in this case. If she will happily lie about what her relationship with SaberSpark looked like from December 2012 onwards, what makes any of us think she's not lying about what it looked like during the several months when they were seeing each other? And secondly, these text messages prove that far from Emily...
It's okay. After EQLA, I pulled back. I began wanting nothing to really do with him, which again is untrue, given the fact that these individuals had continuous text messages after the fact. I stayed in contact with the mutual friends and just never told any of them. After I started dating my boyfriend, I told him, and there was then that brief interaction at BronyCon where I was very clearly uncomfortable. Then after that, that was it. Did he actively try to get in contact with you during any of that time? No. After I stopped reaching out, he never attempted to reach out.
Emily's statements to Mr. Enter that she was pulling away from SaberSpark having realized that he was in some way abusive, the opposite is true. It was SaberSpark who pulled away from Emily. This rejection deeply upset her. That's not just an opinion, by the way, because when we look at her 2025 statement accusing SaberSpark, this exact grievance, which made me suspicious to begin with, is her primary highlighted issue to SaberSpark throughout their later correspondence. We can see that her feelings about this haven't changed in over a decade, because between the two statements, the language she uses is basically identical, as she lambasts him for messing with her emotions. Adding further weight to this, I reached out to her ex-boyfriend Solrak, and when I brought up the fact that the messages indicated that Emily was mad at Saber for ghosting her, Solrak said to me, she takes that so damn personally, like it's the worst thing someone could have done to her back in the day. While none of us were in the room, at this time there is no reason to believe that this was anything other than a consensual and planned hookup at a convention. In fact, Emily's own statements support this position, saying that she developed a crush on him and that he was made aware of it. Regarding the claim that Emily would become flirtatious with SaberSpark, we can actually look to the message.
Okay. I'm lonely. Entertain me. I'm thinking of a number between 1 to 2,473. Guess. 69? No, 103. Like, so she's the one, again, when we establish, like, when we look at the dynamics of their relationship. From all the way back in May 23, 2013, she seems to be the one engaging in a lot of these, like, flirtatious conversations as well. So to say that there was, like, a sort of power dynamic or that implied consent wasn't there would be an inaccuracy, at least per my assessment of this. Because whenever you consider things like implied consent, or whenever you consider things like somebody having, or somebody taking advantage of you, you really have to take into consideration what the dynamics of the relationship were behind the scenes.
Messages in 2013 after Emily broke up with Solrak, where she would return to this behavior.
And it was during the convention when most folks were on the con floor where Emily and I both, holding hands, took off to my room and we sat down. I was shooting the breeze with her, talking about YouTube videos and projects and her own podcast and everything. And then it went, just mutually, just filling the vibes of the room to kissing, and then moved to the bed. And that's where we, had intercourse. Though I was not good at it. I was extremely nervous. There was so many things, and it wasn't that she made me nervous. It wasn't her. It was the idea of someone walking into the room, because I was like, I didn't tell anybody. And they have keys to the rooms, and I just feel like so embarrassed if they walked in and just saw my butt or whatever. But I couldn't really perform. That was the main thing. I was really embarrassed, and we were able to have a little bit of intercourse, but only for I'd say not even for a minute. And ultimately I was like, I can't do this. I can't.
One of the things that I speculated whenever I was covering these allegations is I made the joke that what if all of this really happened because perhaps SaberSpark couldn't really perform? What if this person felt very, very, very upset and turned off, and maybe even wanted to call this coerced rape because SaberSpark was not a great performer. Now she regrets the sex years later. Well, sorry to say, but that might have been a factor here, given SaberSpark's own admission to that case. I find that so funny.
Why, I was like, let's just call it for now. Let's just, keep hanging out. And I was also extremely busy at the convention, which, I said, let's hang out. And we really never really hung out after that, the rest of the convention. She would text me about wanting to hook up again. I remember her texting me, hey, let's party. I remember I was on a panel after that, and she was in the audience in the front row, like waving at me. And
I would like to see DMs of this specifically. Maybe he goes on to show them. But I would like to see messages of this interaction specifically.
I remember her texting me saying, we should, let's party in later, winky face. But we never did because, again, the room was shared by multiple people. And then also just never had the time. I was in so many interviews that I was hosting for Everfree Radio and for myself.
I mean, is there anything else about, I guess, kind of going, because I mean, the way this seems to be described from her side is she froze up, she locked up, she started disassociating, then phoned her friend straight afterwards. I mean, obviously these seem like, different interactions. I've got, we've got no way to know who that friend was. It seems odd to me, obviously, if you've got sort of testimony of there were multiple people in this who had access to this room. This is the moment you'd pick to rape somebody. I'm just wondering if there's anything else here that's, could come to light, or that was done, said, anything else you can remember?
No, I mean, her recollection of events are incorrect. We're both having fun. Enough for her to text me afterwards about wanting to hook up later at the convention. She never froze up. It was just a enthusiastic, mutual hookup. One that I couldn't perform. I couldn't.
Which explains why I didn't go into detail when he made his statement on his channel responding to the allegations. It would explain a lot. A lot of this video is very difficult to give commentary to because it's pretty evident. All I can really sit here and say is, oh well, this speculation that I had seems to be true given the statement of SaberSpark. But at the end of the day, this is still mostly just a he said, she said, and it's up to interpretation whether you believe SaberSpark. I am more inclined to believe SaberSpark given the fact that Emily has been caught on contradiction after contradiction, and her story doesn't really measure up with what's being scrutinized.
And now we're starting to see a better picture of why that second hookup didn't look like the first one. They were already experiencing issues with their casual relationship. This potential pregnancy deeply troubled SaberSpark, and from his perspective, that's not really a surprise. He knew Emily's history, he knew she already had a kid, and let's be honest, at the time, this guy's biggest achievement in life was making videos about cartoon ponies. This isn't somebody anywhere near ready to be a father.
I love cartoon
ponies,
ponies,
isn't it? That this was completely omitted from Emily's original statements. I imagine because this fact makes it quite clear that their relationship was somewhat closer and more familiar than Emily paints in her accusation.
Yes, because in her accusation, she makes it seem as if she was a complete nobody at the time that had no connection with SaberSpark, and SaberSpark took advantage of the fact. But the reality is that no, they had a much closer relationship than she would have liked to, people to believe. It wouldn't have benefited her narrative. The reality is that they were so close that she led this guy on, in a sense, to believe that she was potentially, pregnant, and gave this guy a scare for several months of his life. Which is absolutely disgusting to, omit from a situation like this.
However,
It shows, the calculated effort to try to disrupt SaberSpark's life, at least in my opinion.
I was surprised to find one reference to this from Emily.
Always question the closeness in any allegation in regards to the relationship. Always question the dynamics of said allegation as well, or said relationship behind the allegations. One of the main critiques that I had in regards to this stuff is assessing the dynamics before we could even begin to imply that this was coerced rape, before we can even begin to imply that there was a power dynamic. There has to be so many assessments before we can begin to accept allegations like these at face value.
While being questioned by Mr. Enter, she does bring up this potential pregnancy, saying, I remember texting him worried about getting pregnant because my period came late.
I'm a little embarrassed to say. Embarrassment isn't enough. Okay, you're coming out with with essentially your agency being revoked from you, and your life being under control of another person for sex. Are you really going to be embarrassed to say that, oh, our relationship was this? No, it's obviously omitted. It's obviously omitted to make it seem as if these allegations are a lot more malicious. Fuck, I can't speak. Than what you wanted people to believe. especially when you take into consideration all of the inflammatory language, all of the very flavored ways that you utilize your speech within your testimony. It's clear-cut what the intention was here. It's so clear-cut.
And him telling me that he would handle it if so. But my period came and stuff, that was pretty much it. Enter would respond, the details do help paint a picture. And he's not wrong. It's just unfortunate for Emily that the details of this story make it clear that she is lying about stuff. And every time she gets caught obfuscating the truth or manipulating the narrative, it further chips away at what little credibility.
Imagine being in a relationship, or a sort of like, what's it called, situationship, in this case. A friends with benefit sort of dynamic, right? Where this girl tells you that she has an IUD, only to lead you on with a pregnancy scare for weeks on end. And get you to essentially panic about the foreseeable future of your livelihood, only for them to come back 10 years later and claim that claim that that you raped them.
Interaction where you took her into a bathroom.
I've never
I think
seen a
she's
much
mentioned
more
something about a
incredible
basement.
display and allegation.
Yeah, she claimed that. So we met up at a hotel on, I'm pretty sure it was Thursday or Friday. It was a 2-day con. I think it was a Friday, Saturday convention. So it was either Thursday. It was the day before the convention. And we met up. There was like this not basement, but this lower level at this nice Hilton hotel. I'm pretty sure it was a Hilton. It was a nice hotel in the area. And I remember meeting up with her and we hugged. And again, just niceties. You know, I definitely felt this anxiety just waiting. I want to know the answer is the main thing. And at that point, I wasn't angry at Emily. You know, I'm not angry at her. I was confused that she wouldn't do a
It
pregnancy.
is insane behavior, but that's Emily for you. Yes, true. Matter of fact, when you take into consideration like everything that she's done in the past, when you take into consideration essentially how she went after individuals such as cancer patients, because she was like fucking petty and vindictive, this all makes fucking sense. So it's not insane behavior, but it's definitely expected. I mean, well, no, it is absolutely insane behavior. I said that backwards. It is absolutely insane behavior, but not unexpected, especially for these types of individuals.
Tests, but I'm like, let's just, now we're here together. And we're asking her, we start walking around the hotel, by the way, just catching up. And we went down to like this gym floor and we sat down on this bench and she was leaning her head against me. And I remember being like, can we do the pregnancy test? Because my anxiety was in the better of me.
It's funny. I feel bad for the guy. Well, I mean, retroactively speaking, because he's already gone through this. But I can't help but to empathize with the guy. But it's hilarious. Imagine. No, okay. Again, I pre-watched this video, so I know what he's about to say. I'll just let it play out and then I'll explain. But this right here becomes a lot funnier when you listen to what he's about to say.
Where I'm like, I would. This is nice hanging out with a pretty girl, but like I still want to find out. And she was like, no, I'm not ready for that. Like, can't we just hang out? And can't we just hang out?
I'm not ready for the pregnancy test. Why can't we just hang out
and have fun? And I'm like, okay, I guess it can wait till the end of the convention. And her resting her head against me turned flirty, and just her and I start kissing. And then she grabs my hand and we stand up and we both mutually, walk to the bathroom. And it was empty. The entire floor was completely, empty. There was like some people in the gym nearby. It was a big gym. But we went into the bathroom and she, did that for me because she wanted to take the edge off for me. She's like, I know you're nervous. And we did that. And
yes, imagine you go down to the ground level of a hotel that you're staying in. You want this person to take a pregnancy test. That you're not scared out of your fucking mind that somebody could potentially like entrap you with a baby, as a figure of speech, to be clear. And then the next thing they do is not fucking take the pregnancy test. No, they take it to the bathroom and proceed.
Again, it was.
It's. I don't know how to describe this, but it seems kind of like, I don't know, antithetical, ironic.
It felt like, we're in a bathroom. If someone walks in, like before, what if someone walks in and my anxiety's in the better of me, in tandem with knowing that there's also the anxiety of waiting for this pregnancy test.
So this entire time, Emu Emmy was, I think it is entirely possible. I think it is fair to assume that throughout this entire situation where this guy was afraid of a pregnancy scare, he was also concerned that he was I believe it's entirely possible that Emu Emmy knew that her period was late due to the IUD rather than because of a pregnancy. And she probably utilized that to her advantage to string this guy along. For what reason? Who knows? More than likely because she definitely wanted to hook this guy into a relationship with her. because she was just that type of person.
I'm not gonna, that's potentially my kid. So
IUD? No, it's a form of contraception to avoid pregnancies.
I wasn't going to like abandon her. But as far as like, it feels wrong, it feels right, it feels wrong, no, I was seeing this with eyes wide open of how deathly serious this is if she's pregnant. Which, surprise, surprise, she was not.
So, I mean, like, her original claim is going to a more public space around others and went to an elevator to go to the lobby of the PonyCon hotel, kind of trying to guide you in that way. Am I
wouldn't say,
right?
I wouldn't, it was mutual. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying like, oh, it was just her. I was innocent and she grabbed me and shoved me into the, no, it was again, us sitting on this bench nearby, her laying her head on me, her and I start kissing. And then we both mutually, went to the bathroom where we did some more kissing, which led to other things.
Okay. Are there any other sexual interactions between?
I just find this so silly. Everything about this, I feel bad, but everything about this is incredibly silly.
A work in
I think she knew he was inexperienced and would take her word for it. A lot of guys don't understand how birth control works. I mean, it's very evident that he was inexperienced, given all of the testimony and given even Emmy's recollection of events. He didn't really know how to perform. He didn't really know what he was getting into. He didn't really. He didn't know much of anything at all. He could hardly perform. He only had sex. Keep in mind, he only had sex with this girl for a minute, according to his own statements. According to his own statements.
When we walked out of the theater screening, we were all very, being very critical, very opinionated. And I remember looking to the side, and I saw Emily leaning against the wall with her friend Sandra, and it's almost like Emily was waiting for me to come out. Because then she saw me, and then she looked forward, and she started to pass out. I don't know if she was pretending or not, but she started to pass out and being like, "Oh my gosh, Sandra's like, oh my gosh, she needs help." I'm a lifeguard.
I think it is definitely fair to call Emily in this case a very histrionic individual that is willing to sensationalize situations that she gets herself involved in to get the maximum amount of or pity, so to speak. And it appears that 10 years down the line, she felt. I mean, at this point, what's the real question here? Is Emily a really, I want to say, are they a malicious individual that is specifically out to ruin people's lives at every point in turn? Or does she genuinely feel like she was wronged and thus is talking about these situations in a way where she feels entitled to some sort of apology or some sort of, I don't know, vindication? Is she doing this because she's genuinely deluded in the idea that she was wronged, or is she doing this because she's just a bad person that wants to see people crumble and fall?
So I know some first day, and I walked up over to her along with Palin and Jeffrey, right, Serious Best, and we're just saying, let's get you some water. You okay? And Sandra's like, I need you all to stay here with her. She can't be alone. And ultimately, I can't recall. I think we actually called one of the Disney people came over to actually help out because they were like, hey, we actually have first aid people. But ultimately, we didn't stay around for too long because someone else intervened to help out Emily and Sandra. And then we, were on our way. I remember texting her, be like, let me know if you're okay. But we had to get going because we had another, arrangement we had to take off to. But I do remember her, wait, it's almost like she looked fine, is my recollection, when I walked out of the door. And then when she saw me, she started, acting like she had a heat stroke or something. And again, I don't want to say acting, I don't know, but I remember her looking and then seeing.
I mean, it's entirely possible that given the fact that they had a romantic interaction in the past, or semi-romantic interactions in the past, that what occurred shortly afterwards is that after having these interactions and realizing that she wasn't ever going to get in a relationship with SaberSpark, that she did have a panic attack, which is probably what he's describing here. Again, all of this here showcases that Emily was being blatantly dishonest in her initial accusation against SaberSpark by saying that she didn't want to continue talking to that individual because of what happened between them. But as it turns out, it wasn't that she disconnected from SaberSpark because SaberSpark wronged her, at least not from the allegation sense, from my understanding. It's more so because Emily didn't get what she wanted in terms of forming a relationship with SaberSpark, which is which adds an entirely different light to the situation.
Because I want to avoid drama. I feel like you are latching onto me and I need space. Sorry, Em, I need this for the time being until the doc is done. It is kind of fucking wild to me to look through these messages and find exactly the same grievances that made me suspicious of her 2025 statement, reiterated by Emily in both 2012 and 2013. On Saber's side, he seems well aware of what the issues are because he apologizes in December and then again in February. And Emily accepts this apology, fully bringing SaberSpark back into her life and working to repair the relationship. Again, this shoots some holes in her narrative. Quite significant holes, I'd argue. But it seems like I was pretty bang on the money back on like May the 2nd when I started looking into it. It's also probably worth a quick bit of context as to why SaberSpark would apologize to Emily in February in the first place. Because this wasn't just SaberSpark randomly trying to hook up with a girl who he'd had a previous relationship with. It's actually because SaberSpark was trying to keep the peace at conventions, which were getting a little bit awkward. Let's move forward to February. Because the first time I saw these, obviously I saw them only with days and at times. I didn't see them with dates. And I was surprised to see that, I mean, you message her out the blue, hey I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to say sorry. Sorry for how I treated you. Sorry for going silent for months and not chatting with you. It is my fault. I got scared and ran away and I left you behind. I was a bad friend, so I just want to apologize. I'm not expecting you to be kind of talk to me again at this con or ever, and that is fair. And, you know, it continues on much to this degree. I mean, why message her out the blue?
We were at a convention in Vegas called Las Pegasus. She was there.
So he did apologize. Okay, by the way, this portion right here is incredibly important. This portion is right here is incredibly important. Because this also completely destroys sort of the motivation that Emily was feigning in her interview with Mr. Enter. Because in Emily's interview with Mr. Enter, what she claims is that all she wanted was just an apology. But she received an apology. So was her motivation really to get an apology from SaberSpark for what she claims to be malicious actions that he partook on her? Or was she doing this from a place of vindictiveness? It appears to me that this was definitely a vindictive approach now, given these messages. Because, again, all she said is that she wanted an apology. She received an apology. Hey, I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to say sorry. Sorry for how I treated you. Sorry for going silent for months and not chatting with you. It is my fault. I got scared and ran away and left you behind. I was a bad friend. So I just wanted to apologize. I'm not expecting you to be kind or talk to me again at this con or ever, and that is fair. But I just wanted to say sorry. I won't avoid you. Okay. If we take a minute to go to the initial interview, right here.
If it helped, you know, I mentioned I don't want him to reach out, but if he had emailed me and just gave me an apology of like, I'm sorry.
I mentioned I didn't want him to reach out, but if he had emailed me and just gave me an apology of like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I made you uncomfortable, that would have been a very healing thing to receive. Okay? Well, now that we know she misrepresented the allegations, if we would discount that facet here and only focus on the fact that perhaps she did want an apology so that she could focus on healing, she did receive an apology. So that thing about, oh, I would have rather had an apology so that I could focus on healing, that would have been a very healing thing for me. Bullshit. Absolute bullshit. She did receive an apology. So she was being dishonest at this point of the interview, even then.
Emily accepts this apology, fully bringing SaberSpark back into her life.
And she accepted the apology! What? So she just fucking lied to these individuals in regards to what she wanted out of these allegations, because all of this was this part of this interview right here, which I sat through. She literally says, I'm going to pursue different methods instead of trying to make these allegations publicly. I would rather go to therapy because I feel that I need to heal from these allegations in a different way than pursuing public justice. What I would rather do is heal. And I think that an apology would have been a very healing thing to receive. Motherfucker, you received an apology.
And working
She received an apology
to repair the relationship. Again, this shoots some holes in her narrative. Quite significant holes, I'd argue. But it seems like I was pretty bang on the money back on like May the 2nd when I started looking into it. It's also probably worth a quick bit of context as to why SaberSpark would apologize to Emily in February in the first place. Because this wasn't just SaberSpark randomly trying to hook up with a girl who he'd had a previous relationship with. it's actually because SaberSpark was trying to keep the peace at conventions, which were getting a little bit awkward. Let's move forward to February. Because the first time I saw these, obviously, I saw them only with days and times. I didn't see them with dates. And I was surprised to see that, I mean, you message her out the blue, hey, I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to say sorry. Sorry for how I treated you. Sorry for going silent for months and not chatting with you. It is my fault. I got scared and ran away and I left you behind. I was a bad friend, so I just want to apologize. I'm not expecting you to be kind of talk to me again at this con or ever, and that is fair. And, you know, it continues on much to this degree. I mean, why message her out the blue?
We were at a convention in Vegas called Las Pegasus. She was there, I was there, and there's even vlog footage that backs that up. And at the time, I believe she was starting to date Solrak. And I would see them together at the convention, at the...
Yeah, what else is after this? What else is after this? Because there's other things that I want to go through. A lot of this is really just him retelling a story about what Emily did after the relationship. But we've already gotten enough established here to suggest that SaberSpark more than likely didn't rape this girl.
With all of us hanging out. I'm a bit of a...
She has, like, omitted so many details and has verifiably lied about some of her motivations. At least in this quick cross-reference, we can quickly tell that, no, she definitely came out with these allegations not because she needed to heal or because she wanted to find some sort of, like, you know, justice, but rather because she wanted to, like, hammer this guy down.
Peacemaker.
And potentially destroy his career and reputation.
I don't like, you know, I just don't like tension. I don't like that feeling.
Just don't like him. Enough said.
So I thought, you know, it wasn't right of me to ghost her and don't follow her and to just drop her like that so unceremoniously. I owe her an apology for not being a good friend. You know, yeah, we didn't work out as friends with benefits or anything else, but that doesn't mean we still can't be friends. And that's why I reached out to her, especially for the sake of just having, you know, a peace.
This is a huge discrepancy because in this interview, she describes that day as being incredibly traumatic. In her response, she describes that as being traumatic. Well, not really traumatic, but violent, so to speak. After that, he almost immediately initiated making out with me and guided me to his bed. In this moment, he did not directly ask me for consent. I was thrown onto his bed and he would insert himself into me. I felt extremely nervous and uncomfortable because I had never experienced any sort of sexual intimacy with someone I was not dating before. At that moment, I laid there, dissociating, as it felt very wrong, while I was trying to rationalize it in my head to convince myself it was a safe and normal encounter. He rushed off to clean and finish himself and came back into the bed and offered me a handshake saying friends. This would cause me, for the rest of the event, to feel that I was taken advantage of and ashamed of myself for not trying to stop the interaction, though I tried pretending I was fine to everyone around me. Yet... Right. EQLA was my favorite. I would have gone if it weren't on Mother's Day weekend.
He claims Saber assaulted her at. She doesn't describe it that way though, saying that EQLA was one of her favorites. Now, as the conversation moves on, we actually see that Saber's pretty comfortable in asking questions about their friends with benefit thing that they had, and Emily doesn't seem to have any issues. It appears that the mention of EQLA prompted SaberSpark to ask some questions about their former engagements, and he starts by asking Emily whether she ever told anybody about the hookups. Emily responds that while she never told anyone they had sex, referring to it as their secret, she did tell Sondra and Solrak that SaberSpark sort of messed with her feelings.
Okay, this, when you actually start to cross-compare with what she said in her statement, as well with what she said in the interview, makes it seem as if this was definitely a vindictive ploy to get back at him for not essentially giving her what she wanted. And she utilized the idea that they had sex to sort of like create a wider narrative that she was sexually assaulted by SaberSpark when that wasn't the case.
Once again, whether it is 5 months after they stopped seeing each other or 13 years later, she's still talking about this with the same language. Next, SaberSpark would ask her, so was I good in bed or no? And interestingly, here Emily says, I thought I already told you, yes. Now look, at this point, we've all heard the story and we all know that that's not true. But what's important about this comment is the fact that
she was looking for a baby daddy replacement? Probably. That's entirely, you know, I'm actually inclined to believe that that was probably one of her motivations. To like essentially look for a replacement to her son.
Emily is alluding to previously having discussed it with SaberSpark, and that shoots another quite significant hole in her narrative. Emily paints a picture of distance to SaberSpark, that their engagements came as a surprise to her and were not discussed afterwards. But if she is here saying, "I've already told you this," then that would obviously indicate wider conversations about their friends with benefits relationship. In a myriad of ways, this comment and the conversation both before and after it validate SaberSpark's testimony,